The sound came first. Not the sound of skin against skin or a bed shifting under unfamiliar weight, but laughter. Soft, unguarded, intimate laughter, floating down the hallway of the penthouse Naomi Carter had spent years turning into a sanctuary. Her hand froze mid-step, keys still warm in her palm. For half a second, her mind refused to translate what her ears already understood. Then she heard her husband's voice, Grant's voice, low, amused, uncareful in a way he hadn't been with her in months. And then she heard the name, not hers. The world didn't shatter all at once. It cracked, quietly, like ice beneath a single, careless footstep. Naomi stood perfectly still, the Chicago skyline glowing through floor-to-ceiling glass behind her, Lake Michigan dark and endless in the distance. She thought, absurdly, that the apartment smelled the same as always. Clean, expensive, curated. Another laugh. Closer now. She walked toward the bedroom on instinct, each step measured, controlled, as if her body knew something her heart hadn't caught up to yet. The door was half open, just enough. Grant's shirt lay discarded on the chair. Her chair. His voice drifted out again, warm, familiar, wrong. And then she saw her, Sloane Mercer. Her best friend's dark hair spilled across Naomi's white sheets. The same woman who had stood beside her at gallery openings, who had toasted their marriage with champagne, who had once held Naomi's hands in a hospital hallway after a miscarriage and whispered, "You're so strong." Naomi didn't scream. She didn't rush forward. She didn't drop her keys. She watched. She watched Grant, her husband of 5 years, the man the city adored, the man who built campaigns about trust and authenticity for global brands, lean down and kiss another woman with a tenderness Naomi hadn't felt in a long time. She watched Sloane smile up at him, comfortable, entitled, like someone who belonged there. The betrayal wasn't just physical. It was effortless, practiced. Naomi stepped back before either of them could see her. The hallway seemed longer on the way out, quieter, as if the apartment itself were holding its breath. She slipped the door closed behind her with care, the click of the lock sounding louder than any shout she might have made. In the elevator, her reflection stared back at her, composed, elegant, whole. No tears. Not yet. Her phone buzzed, a notification she didn't read. The doors opened and the cold night air met her like a slap as she stepped onto the street. That was the moment her life divided itself cleanly into two halves. And if you're already holding your breath, if something in this moment feels uncomfortably familiar, stay with me. Tap like, leave a comment, follow along, because this is not just a story about betrayal. It's a story about what happens after a woman refuses to disappear. Naomi walked without direction, her heels striking the pavement in a steady rhythm that kept her upright. She didn't call anyone, not her mother, not a friend, not even Sloane, who would have answered with concern and lies layered so smoothly Naomi might have believed them an hour ago. 5 years. 5 years of shaping her life around Grant's orbit. She had been a rising star once, an education director with a sharp eye and a sharper mind, the kind of woman museums fought to recruit. Then came marriage and dinners and donor events where her role became quieter, smaller, supportive. "You're so good at smoothing things over," Grant used to say. "You make everything easier." She had mistaken that for love. Her phone buzzed again. This time she looked. A text from Grant. "Running late. Don't wait up." Naomi stopped walking. The city surged around her. Cars, voices, neon, life continuing at full volume while something essential inside her went silent. She stared at the message, then at the timestamp. "Running late." She didn't reply. Instead, she opened her notes app and typed a single line. "You don't know yet." It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. To herself. Naomi slipped her phone back into her coat and started walking again. Slower now, more deliberate. Somewhere between the glow of Michigan Avenue and the dark water beyond, the shock began to harden into something else. Not rage, not despair, clarity. She didn't know how this would end. She didn't know what she would lose. But one truth settled deep in her chest, steady and unmovable. She would not beg, she would not vanish, and she would not let this be the story told about her. Behind a closed door, her old life was unraveling without her. And Naomi Carter, for the first time in a long time, was walking towards something entirely her own. By morning, the city had decided nothing was wrong. Chicago woke the way it always did. Steel and glass catching the pale winter light, headlines scrolling across digital billboards, coffee shops filling with people who still believed in their plans for the day. From the outside, Naomi Carter's life fit neatly into that rhythm. It always had. She stood at the bathroom mirror in her penthouse, smoothing concealer beneath her eyes with practiced precision. The woman staring back at her looked composed, enviable even. Her skin glowed. Her posture was impeccable. There was no visible trace of the night before, no sign that the ground beneath her marriage had collapsed while the rest of the world slept. Grant was already dressed when she stepped into the bedroom. His back was to her as he adjusted his cufflinks. The reflection of his face calm, familiar, unreadable. "You're up early," he said easily, as if nothing in the world had shifted. "So are you." Her voice surprised her with its steadiness. He turned, smiled, leaned in to kiss her cheek. A gesture so automatic it felt borrowed, like a line delivered by an actor who no longer believed the script, but knew it by heart. Naomi didn't flinch. She didn't recoil. She noted the scent of his cologne, something new, something she hadn't chosen. "Big day," Grant continued, grabbing his phone. "The Maxwell account presentation. Press will be there." Of course they would. Grant Holloway thrived in rooms full of attention. He had built a career on controlling narratives, on making brands feel human and scandals feel manageable. He knew exactly how to look like a man worth trusting. Naomi followed him into the kitchen, sunlight spilling across marble countertops and imported stone tiles that had once made her proud. She poured coffee, her hands steady, her mind cataloging details with an eerie calm. The way Grant avoided her eyes, the way his phone never left his palm, the way their reflection in the glass, tall, polished, beautiful, still looked like a couple other people envied. That was the cruelest part. To the outside world, they were flawless. The power couple. The elegant black woman with the sharp mind and the perfect poise, and the white American strategist who just got it, who spoke about diversity and equity with the ease of someone who had never paid a personal price for either. Together they hosted fundraisers, sat on boards, posed for photos that lived forever online. Naomi had learned how to stand half a step behind him in those photos. Not smaller, never smaller, but complementary. The woman who made the room warmer, the wife who made donors linger, the one journalists described as gracious when they ran out of words for brilliance. "You still on for the museum dinner tonight?" Grant asked, scrolling through emails. "Yes," she said. "Of course." Of course. The phrase had become muscle memory. The dinner was a benefit for arts education in underserved schools. Work Naomi had once led with passion, before her title quietly shifted from architect to accessory. The invitations bore both their names. The speeches would belong to him. Grant checked his watch. "I might be late. Don't wait for me if I am." She smiled. The same smile that had reassured donors, charmed trustees, softened rooms that weren't built for women like her. "I won't." He left with a kiss on the forehead and a promise he didn't realize had expired. The door closed behind him, and the apartment fell silent again. Naomi leaned against the counter, breathing slowly, letting the stillness press against her ribs. This was the life everyone thought she wanted. The penthouse, the influence, the proximity to power, the marriage that looked like safety. No one saw the quiet negotiations she made with herself every day, the way she edited her opinions to be more palatable, the way her accomplishments became ours while her sacrifices remained invisible. The way love had been repackaged as usefulness. Her phone buzzed. A message from Sloan. "You seemed distracted last night. Everything okay?" Naomi stared at the screen for a long moment. She imagined Sloane typing that message with concern carefully applied, like lipstick before a mirror. She imagined how easily she might have believed it yesterday. "Just tired," Naomi replied. "Big week." Three dots appeared, then vanished. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside, Naomi Carter stood in the middle of a life that looked perfect from every angle that mattered to everyone except her. And for the first time, she understood the truth with devastating clarity. The story everyone believed wasn't just incomplete, it was a lie she had helped tell. Grant left his phone behind on purpose. That was the lie Naomi told herself at first, because the alternative, that he could be so careless, so confident in her blindness, was harder to swallow. But buzzed on the nightstand just after 9, vibrating against the polished wood in short, impatient bursts. Naomi was in the living room, sitting on the edge of the sofa with her coat still on, staring at nothing. The sound cut through the apartment like a blade. She didn't move. Not at first. Privacy had always been one of the unspoken rules of their marriage. They didn't read each other's messages. They didn't ask unnecessary questions. Trust, Grant liked to say, was about restraint. Naomi had believed him. She had believed so many things. The phone buzzed again. She walked to the bedroom slowly, as if the floor might shift beneath her feet. Grant's side of the bed was cold, perfectly smoothed, as if he had erased all evidence of his absence except for this one mistake. The screen lit up just as she reached for it. "Last night was dangerous. I can still feel you." Naomi didn't sit down. She didn't breathe. The words hovered between her and the phone, rewriting the air in the room. She read them once, then again. Her thumb trembled, not with uncertainty but with recognition. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't harmless flirtation. This was intimacy that had learned her husband's body. A second message appeared. "We have to be more careful. She notices things." Naomi let the phone drop onto the bed. The sound was soft, almost polite. For a moment her vision tunneled, the room narrowing until there was nothing but the slow thunder of her own pulse. She pressed a hand to her stomach, fighting the urge to retch, to collapse, to scream Grant's name into the silence. Instead, she stood very still. When she picked the phone up again, her hands were steadier. There was no password. There had never been a password. Grant had never needed one. Naomi had never looked. The message thread opened in a rush of color and betrayal. Weeks, no, months. Carefully spaced texts, voice notes she didn't play, hotel confirmations she recognized, jokes that belonged to a shared language Naomi had been excluded from, a photograph she didn't linger on long enough to remember in detail, only long enough to understand what it meant. And then there were the messages about her. "She's always so intense. She needs to relax. She's grateful for everything. That's her problem." Naomi sat down hard on the edge of the bed. The room tilted, but she refused to let it take her with it. She scrolled slowly, deliberately, like a woman gathering evidence at the scene of a crime. Grant, she'd never leave. She needs the life. Sloane, you give her too much credit. Grant, I give her exactly what she needs. Something inside Naomi went very quiet. She thought she would feel rage first, or devastation, or grief sharp enough to split her open. Instead, what came was a cold, clarifying stillness, a realization so complete it felt like a betrayal of its own. This wasn't an accident. This was architecture. She stood and walked to the bathroom, bracing herself against the counter as nausea rose and fell like a wave she refused to drown in. Her reflection looked unfamiliar, eyes too bright, lips slightly parted, a woman caught between selves. She swallowed, rinsed her mouth, and met her own gaze. "No," she whispered, not to Grant, not to Sloane, to the part of herself that had once believed love required endurance. Back in the bedroom, she sat cross-legged on the bed and opened her laptop. The screen's glow felt grounding, factual. She created a folder, then another. Dates, screenshots, timelines, cross-referenced locations and lies. The work steadied her hands, gave shape to the chaos trying to claw its way up her throat. This was not paranoia. This was documentation. Her phone buzzed on the dresser. Her own phone this time. A text from Grant. Running late again. Don't wait up. Naomi stared at the message, then at the open file on her screen. A bitter, humorless laugh escaped her before she could stop it. She typed a reply and deleted it. Typed another. Deleted that too. Instead, she added the message to the folder. A strange thing happened then. The fear she had expected never fully arrived. In its place came something harder, sharper. The understanding that she had been living inside a story written by other people, and that stories could be edited, corrected, exposed. She thought of Sloane's question that morning. Everything okay? She thought of Grant's easy smile, his careful distance, the way he had reduced her to a role that required gratitude, but not truth. Naomi closed the laptop and sat in the quiet, letting the evidence settle around her like armor. They thought she wouldn't look. They thought she wouldn't leave. They thought wrong. Outside, the city lights flickered on, one by one, illuminating a skyline built on steel and certainty. Inside the penthouse, Naomi Carter reached for her coat, not to run, not to hide, but to make space for the woman she was about to become. This was only the beginning, and this time, she had receipts. Sloane Mercer suggested lunch. The message arrived just after noon, dressed in casual concern. I keep thinking about you. Want to grab something quick? Just us. A heart emoji followed, soft and pink, the kind Naomi had sent her dozens of times over the years without thinking. Naomi read it once, then again. Then she set her phone face down on the table and stared out the window of a quiet cafe 2 blocks from the museum district, watching pedestrians hurry past with the confidence of people who believed they were moving towards something solid. Of course, Sloane wanted lunch. Sloane had always known when to appear, after a disappointment, before a decision, during moments when Naomi's guard was lowest. That had been the magic of their friendship. Sloane didn't just know Naomi's life. She knew its weak points, the seams, the places where things could be pulled apart if someone applied just enough pressure. Naomi typed back, sure, same place. Sloane arrived exactly 7 minutes late, cheeks flushed from the cold, coat perfectly tailored, hair styled to look effortless in the way that required planning. She smiled when she saw Naomi, a smile practiced in mirrors and boardrooms alike, and leaned in for a hug that lasted half a second too long. There you are, she said warmly. I was starting to worry. Naomi returned the smile with equal precision. About? Sloane waved the question away as she slid into the chair across from her. You've been distant, which is understandable. Grant's been impossible lately. There it was, Grant's name, placed gently between them like an offering. Naomi watched Sloane's eyes as she said it, how they searched her face, how they lingered just long enough to measure the effect. This was not a woman guessing. This was a woman testing the temperature of water she already planned to swim in. I'm fine, Naomi said. Just busy. Sloane nodded, signaling understanding she hadn't earned. Of course, you always are. That's one of the things I admire about you. You hold everything together. Naomi wondered how long Sloane had been saying that to Grant. They ordered salads neither of them intended to finish. Small talk followed. Museum politics, donor gossip, a passing complaint about the city council. Sloane filled the silence with ease, her voice smooth, confident, the voice of a woman who knew how to control rooms and narratives alike. She talked about her work in political PR, about damage control and crisis strategy, about how quickly reputations could shift with the right push. Naomi listened and remembered. She remembered Sloane leaning close at a fundraiser years ago, murmuring which trustee hated surprises, which journalist could be swayed with access, which story needed burying before it breathed. She remembered thinking, thank God she's on my side. So, Sloane said eventually, lowering her voice, how are things really? Naomi took a sip of water. What do you mean, with Grant? Sloane tilted her head, concern carefully applied. He's under so much pressure. Men like him don't always know how to ask for help. Men like him. Naomi almost laughed. They don't, Naomi agreed softly. Sloane exhaled, as if relieved. I just don't want you getting hurt. You give so much. Sometimes I worry you don't see how much leverage you actually have. Leverage. The word landed heavy between them. Naomi met Sloane's gaze fully now. Leverage over what? For the first time, Sloane hesitated. It was subtle, just a flicker, but Naomi caught it. The pause of someone recalibrating. Then Sloane smiled again, too quick. Over your life, she said lightly. Your story. People underestimate you. They always have. The irony burned. Naomi leaned back in her chair, studying the woman she had trusted with her secrets, her grief, her insecurities. The woman who had known about Grant's temper, his fear of irrelevance, his hunger for admiration. The woman who had listened as Naomi confided doubts about her marriage, about feeling invisible, about losing herself. Sloane had known where the bodies were buried because Naomi had shown her the graves. Do you ever feel like, Naomi said carefully, you've outgrown the version of yourself people expect you to be? Sloane's eyes sharpened. All the time. And what do you do with that? Naomi pressed. Sloane smiled, but there was steel beneath it now. You evolve. You take what you're owed. You stop waiting for permission. There it was. Not guilt, not remorse. Ambition stripped bare. Naomi nodded slowly. That makes sense. They finished lunch with practiced normalcy. When they stood to leave, Sloane reached out, squeezing Naomi's hand. Whatever's going on, she said softly, remember I'm on your side. I always have been. Naomi watched her walk away, heels clicking confidently against the pavement, disappearing into the flow of the city as if nothing had changed. But everything had. Sloane hadn't asked if Grant was cheating. She hadn't denied anything. She hadn't looked surprised. She had simply maneuvered, probing for how much Naomi knew and how dangerous that knowledge might be. That night, back in the penthouse, Naomi opened her laptop and added a new folder to the growing archive. Sloane, timeline. Because friends like Sloane didn't just betray you, they prepared for it. And Naomi was done being unprepared. Naomi did not plan the trap all at once. It assembled itself slowly, piece by careful piece, the way dangerous things often do. Quietly, convincingly, disguised as logic. The idea came to her not as vengeance, but as necessity. She did not want guesses. She did not want assumptions that could later be turned against her. Grant built his career on plausible deniability. Sloane made her living dismantling inconvenient truths. If Naomi moved without certainty, they would erase her before she ever spoke. So she waited. For 3 days, she played her part flawlessly. She answered Grant's messages with the same calm warmth he expected. She attended meetings. She smiled at donors. She listened as colleagues complained about museum politics and thought, distantly, how strange it was that the world insisted on continuing. At night, she barely slept. Her mind kept circling the same questions. How long? How careful? How cruel do you have to be to laugh in someone else's home? The answers arrived in fragments, memories she reinterpreted now with brutal clarity. Late nights that never quite made sense. Sloane's sudden availability. Grant's impatience whenever Naomi asked for more than surface-level affection. By the fourth morning, Naomi understood something essential. If she confronted them now, they would lie. If she accused them without forcing the truth into the open, they would rewrite it. If she reacted instead of orchestrated, she would lose control of her own story. So she built a moment they couldn't resist. The museum benefit dinner had been on the calendar for weeks. An intimate gathering for top donors, hosted at their penthouse, catered, photographed, visible enough to matter. Naomi canceled it that morning with a single, apologetic email. Family emergency, rescheduling soon. Sympathy flooded back in response. Then she told Grant, I'm going to my sister's, she said casually that afternoon, folding clothes into a small overnight bag. She needs me tonight. I'll be gone by 6. Grant barely looked up from his phone. Okay, too easy. Naomi watched his reflection in the mirror as she spoke, noted the way his shoulders relaxed, the faint exhale of relief he didn't know how to hide. She kissed his cheek before leaving because she wanted him comfortable, because comfort made people careless. At 5:47, Naomi left the apartment. At 5:49, she stopped at the end of the hallway, pressed her back against the cool wall, and breathed until her pulse slowed. She didn't go to her sister's. She went to a cafe down the block, ordered tea she didn't drink, and waited. At 6:15, her phone buzzed. Sloan, is Grant home? Naomi stared at the message, her jaw tightening. She picked up Grant's forgotten personal phone from her bag, the one she had already synced to her laptop, the one that had rewritten her understanding of trust, and typed a reply. Yes, come by. She stared at the words for a long moment before sending them. The danger wasn't that she might see them together. She had already seen enough. The danger was that she might hear something she could never unhear, that she might learn the betrayal was deeper, colder, more intentional than she was prepared for. By 6:50, Naomi was back in the building, riding the service elevator up, heart hammering so loudly she was certain it would give her away. She unlocked the door with care, stepping inside her own home like an intruder. The apartment was quiet, the lights dimmed, the city glowing faintly beyond the windows. She slipped into Grant's study and cracked the door just enough to see the hallway. At 7:03, the lock turned. Sloan entered like she belonged there. No hesitation, no nerves. She hung her coat on the chair Naomi's grandmother had left her and smiled into the space, already relaxed. Grant? She called softly, Naomi's hands clenched into fists. Grant emerged moments later, already changed, already eager. What followed was worse than Naomi had imagined. Not just the physical closeness, but the familiarity, the ease, the way they spoke about her as if she were a concept instead of a person. She's predictable, Grant said at one point, his voice intimate and unguarded. She won't fight. She needs stability too much. Sloan laughed. You trained her well. The words landed like a blow. Naomi felt something inside her fracture, not shatter, but harden. The last fragile hope that this was temporary, accidental, or regretted dissolved completely. This was not a lapse. This was a partnership built on her erasure. She stayed long enough to hear them plan, long enough to understand the scope, long enough to know that when this ended, it would not be because she lost. When she finally slipped out, leaving the apartment exactly as she'd found it, her legs trembled, not with fear, but with resolve. Traps were dangerous because they required patience, because they forced you to sit with the truth until it finished revealing itself. Naomi stepped into the night air, her breath visible in the cold, and knew with absolute certainty that there was no going back. The trap had closed, and she had survived. Naomi did not mean to stay as long as she did. At first, she told herself she would listen just until certainty settled, until she could no longer pretend there was any version of this that ended with reconciliation. But certainty, once invited in, has a way of demanding more. It asks for context, for motive, for truth stripped of performance. She stood in the narrow dark of Grant's study, the door barely ajar, the sound of her own breathing thunderous in her ears. From the bedroom, voices drifted out with cruel clarity, unguarded now that they believed themselves alone. Grant laughed softly, the sound intimate in a way that made Naomi's skin prickle. You should have seen her face last week when I told her the board wanted me to travel more. She nodded like it made sense, like she always does. Sloan hummed in response, a sound of agreement, of satisfaction. She's so earnest, always trying to prove she belongs in rooms that were never built for her. Naomi's hand flew to her mouth. Grant didn't correct her. He sighed instead, indulgent. She makes everything heavier than it needs to be, always talking about meaning, about impact. It's exhausting. There it was. The word that had followed Naomi her entire adult life. Exhausting. As if her depth were a flaw. As if caring were an inconvenience. She's lucky, honestly, Sloan continued. You gave her a life most women like her only dream about. Like her, Naomi felt the phrase lodge in her chest, sharp and unmistakable. She had heard versions of it before, whispered at galas, implied in praise that sounded like surprise. She had learned how to smile through it, how to translate it into gratitude so no one would accuse her of anger, of bitterness, of being too much. Grant chuckled. Exactly, and she knows it. That's why she won't leave. She needs the image, the safety. Without me, he paused, letting the sentence trail off. She's just another idealist with opinions. Sloane laughed then, bright and careless. You really believe that, don't you? Don't you? Grant replied. She had potential, sure, but she traded it for comfort. I just gave her the structure. Structure. As if he had built her. As if she hadn't existed in full color before him. Naomi pressed her back against the wall, heart pounding so hard she was afraid it would give her away. Each word felt like a deliberate dismantling, a post-mortem conducted while she was still alive. What about when she finds out? Sloane asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Grant's voice dropped. Careful now. She won't. And if she does, we'll control it. You know how this works. Naomi's blood ran cold. She's emotional, he continued. People expect that. If she says anything, we frame it as stress, burnout, marital strain. She's been through a lot, miscarriages, work pressure. It'll sound reasonable. Sloane exhaled, impressed. You've thought this through. I had to, Grant said simply. My reputation can't take a hit, and she doesn't have the stomach for a real fight. She hates being seen as difficult. Naomi closed her eyes. He was right about one thing. She did hate it. She had spent years shrinking her voice to avoid that label, swallowing indignities so others could remain comfortable. She had learned to survive by softening herself. But survival was not the same as living. And us? Sloane asked quietly. Grant didn't hesitate. We wait. We make it clean. When the time's right, I'll leave her. Publicly, respectfully. You'll be the next chapter, not the scandal. Sloane smiled into his shoulder. I knew you'd choose me. Naomi felt something inside her finally give way. Not into tears, but into a clarity so sharp it bordered on relief. This was the truth she had needed. Not the affair, not even the lies, but the certainty that the man she had loved did not see her as a person. She had been a role, a shield, a narrative asset. She stayed just long enough to hear Grant say the words that sealed it. She'll land on her feet, he said lightly. She always does what's expected. Naomi stepped back, careful, silent, her body moving on instinct alone. She slipped out of the apartment the same way she had entered, the door closing behind her with a soft, final click. In the elevator, she stared at her reflection again, but this time she recognized the woman looking back. Her eyes were dark, steady, awake in a way they hadn't been in years. On the street, the night air cut through her coat, sharp and grounding. Naomi inhaled deeply, letting the cold fill her lungs, letting the truth settle where denial once lived. They had spoken freely because they thought she was an object, a backdrop, a problem that could be managed. They were wrong, because people who are not seen as human have nothing left to lose. And Naomi Carter was done being invisible. The city did not notice when Naomi Carter broke. Michigan Avenue glowed the way it always did at night, storefronts lit like promises, taxis sliding past in confident streams, people wrapped in coats in destinations. Naomi walked among them at first, her pace steady, her spine straight, the woman she had trained herself to be moving on instinct long after the reason had fled. Then, somewhere between a jewelry store window and a darkened bus stop, her legs stopped listening. She stood there, frozen, the noise of the city blurring into a distant roar. The words she had heard in her own bedroom replayed without mercy, each one landing with renewed precision. She's always so intense. Rooms that were never built for her. Without me, she's just another idealist with opinions. Naomi pressed a hand to her chest as if she could physically hold herself together. Her breath came shallow, uneven. For years she had told herself that endurance was strength, that grace under pressure was dignity, that if she could just be reasonable enough, patient enough, good enough, love would eventually meet her where she stood. The truth was cold. Love hadn't failed her. People had used her vision blurred. She leaned against a lamppost, the metal biting through her gloves, grounding her just enough to keep her upright. She told herself to keep moving, to go somewhere, anywhere, but her body refused. That was when the tears came. Not the quiet, elegant kind she allowed herself in private bathrooms or late at night. These were sobs that tore out of her without permission, shaking her shoulders, stealing her breath. The kind of crying that frightened people because it couldn't be explained away as temporary. A woman walking past slowed, glanced at Naomi's face, then looked away quickly. A man pretended to check his phone. The city gave her space, not out of kindness, but discomfort. Naomi slid down until she was sitting on the cold stone ledge of a storefront, her head bowed, hair falling forward like a curtain. She cried for the woman she had been before she learned to make herself smaller. She cried for the years she had poured into a marriage that had quietly erased her. She cried for the version of herself Grant and Sloan had reduced to a strategy. She cried until there was nothing left to hold in. Headlights cut through the dark, slowing beside her. Naomi barely noticed at first. Then a shadow fell across the pavement, and a voice, calm, firm, unfamiliar, cut through the fog in her head. "Darling," Naomi looked up. A black SUV idled at the curb, sleek and unobtrusive. The back window was lowered, revealing a woman in her early 60s, with silver hair pulled into a low, elegant knot and eyes sharp enough to miss nothing. She didn't look alarmed. She didn't look curious. She looked like someone who had seen this moment before. "You're not okay," the woman said, not unkindly, "and you don't need to pretend you are." Naomi laughed weakly through tears. "I'm fine." The woman raised a single eyebrow. "No, you're not, and that's allowed." Something in her tone, authority without judgment, certainty without intrusion, undid the last fragile thread holding Naomi together. She shook her head, unable to speak. The woman opened the door. "Get in. It's cold, and you look like you've reached the part of the night where doing nothing alone becomes dangerous." Naomi hesitated. Every sensible instinct told her this was reckless, but sensibility had guided her straight into a life that had just collapsed. Right now, the idea of kindness from someone who owed her nothing felt safer than anything familiar. She stood, unsteady, and slid into the back seat. The door closed with a quiet, decisive thud, sealing her inside warmth and leather in silence. The SUV pulled back into traffic smoothly, as if this were all perfectly ordinary. The woman handed her a clean handkerchief without a word. Naomi took it, surprised by the simple mercy of not being asked to explain. "I'm Marisol Vega," the woman said after a moment. "And before you say anything, no, I'm not trying to save you. I'm just making sure you survive the night." Naomi pressed the cloth to her face, her breath hitching. "I don't even know who I am anymore." Marisol studied her with open interest. "That usually means you're about to remember." Naomi laughed again, softly this time, disbelief woven through exhaustion. Outside the window, Michigan Avenue receded, its lights blurring into streaks of gold. In the front seat, the driver remained silent, his presence steady and unobtrusive. Naomi barely registered him, only the sense that the car itself was carrying her away from something irrevocably broken. For the first time since the sound behind the door, Naomi let herself lean back, close her eyes, and stop performing strength. She had reached the bottom. And somewhere in the quiet of that moving car, she felt, dimly, frighteningly, the possibility that bottom was not the end, but the beginning of something she had never allowed herself to imagine. For now, she was alive. For now, she was safe. For now, that would have to be enough. Naomi woke up in a room that smelled like money and silence. The ceiling above her was high and pale, edged with soft, indirect light. Heavy curtains muted the city outside. For a moment, she didn't know where she was, only that the sheets were impossibly smooth and warm, and her body felt as if it had been wrung out and left to dry. Then memory rushed in. Laughter behind a door, Michigan Avenue, the black SUV, the woman's steady eyes. Marisol Vega. Naomi sat up too fast. The room tilted, and nausea rolled through her. She pressed a hand to her forehead, breathing carefully until the dizziness eased. On the bedside table sat a glass of water, 2 aspirin, and her phone, powered off, face down, as if even technology had been instructed to let her rest. A knock sounded. Not tentative, not intrusive. A knock that assumed it would be answered. Marisol entered without waiting, carrying a tray like she owned the air. She wore a dark silk blouse and tailored trousers, hair still immaculate, as if sleep had never been part of her life. "Good," she said, setting the tray down. "You're awake." Naomi's throat felt raw. "Where am I?" "My suite," Marisol replied, pouring coffee into a delicate cup. "A hotel near the river. No one here knows your name. No one here cares." Naomi stared at her. "Why did you bring me here?" Marisol's gaze didn't flicker. "Because you were breaking in public. And I've learned that when women break in public, men start building cages around the story." Naomi's stomach tightened. "You don't even know me." Marisol took a sip of coffee, unhurried. "I know that look. I know the way you held your face together while your body fell apart. I know you weren't crying because you lost a man. You were crying because you lost yourself." Naomi swallowed, the words hitting too accurately. "And you're what? Some kind of guardian angel?" Marisol's mouth curved, not quite a smile. "No, I'm a woman who didn't get a guardian angel when I needed one. I'm also someone with resources and a very low tolerance for cruelty dressed up as charm." Naomi tried to stand. Her legs trembled, weak with exhaustion. Pride flared, automatic, stubborn. "I can leave. I don't want—" "Help?" Marisol finished calmly. "Yes, you do, but you don't want to owe anyone. I understand. Sit down." The tone wasn't harsh, but it carried weight. Naomi sat, angry at herself for obeying, angrier that it felt like relief. Marisol slid a small envelope across the table. Inside was a hotel key card and a folded sheet of paper with 3 bullet points written in clean, decisive handwriting. "You will not go back alone. You will not answer his messages. You will decide what happens next, before he does." Naomi's throat tightened. "He's already decided," she whispered. "He said—" She stopped, nausea rising again. Marisol's eyes sharpened. "He said you were nothing without him." The room went still. Naomi's gaze snapped up. "How do you—" "Because men like that always say the same thing," Marisol replied. "They don't see women as people. They see them as scaffolding. And when the building starts to shake, they blame the structure." Naomi looked down at her hands. They were steady now, but she could feel the tremor underneath, like electricity trapped beneath skin. "I don't know what to do." Marisol leaned forward, elbows on her knees, voice lowering. "Yes, you do. You just don't want to admit what it will cost." Naomi laughed once, small, bitter. "The cost is my life." "No," Marisol corrected. "The cost is your comfort. There's a difference." Naomi flinched as if struck. Comfort. She thought of the penthouse, the curated dinner parties, the way donors smiled at her because she made them feel progressive without asking them to change. She thought of the safety she had mistaken for love. She thought of Sloane's voice. "You take what you're owed." Her phone, face down on the table, felt suddenly heavy with unspoken threats. Marisol reached out and turned it on. The screen exploded with notifications. "Grant, where are you? Your sister said you're not there. Stop playing games, you're scaring people. Please call me, I'm worried. If you don't come home, I'll come get you. You're not well, I can tell. Let me help." Naomi's hands went cold. Marisol watched her read. "He's moving already," she said softly. "He's building the story. Concerned husband, fragile wife, unstable woman." Naomi's breath hitched, panic rising. sharp and sudden. He'll call my board. He'll call the museum. He will, Marisol agreed, voice like steel wrapped in velvet. And that is why you need to move faster. Naomi's vision narrowed, the edges of the room fuzzing. Her chest tightened. She couldn't get enough air. It felt like drowning, quiet and inevitable. Marisol stood instantly, crossing the room with the efficiency of someone who had handled crisis before. She placed a firm hand on Naomi's shoulder. "Look at me," she said. Naomi tried. Tears blurred her vision. "Breathe in," Marisol commanded. "Count to 4. Hold. Out." Naomi obeyed, gasping at first, then slower, then steadier. The panic didn't vanish, but it retreated enough for her to think. Marisol's hand remained on her shoulder, anchoring, not coddling. "This is the part where you're tempted to run back," she said quietly, "to fix it, to apologize, to make him comfortable so he stops threatening you." Naomi stared at the unread messages. "I just want it to stop." "It won't stop until you stop it," Marisol replied. "And you can, but only if you accept something. Saving yourself is going to look messy to people who benefited from your silence." Naomi's mouth trembled. I don't have the strength for a war." Marisol's expression softened, but her voice stayed firm. "You don't need strength for a war. You need strategy for a survival." She reached into the envelope again and slid a card across the table. A name, a number. Aisha Reynolds, attorney at law. "She's the best," Marisol said, "and she understands how men like your husband move. She'll protect you legally while you protect yourself emotionally." Naomi stared at the card as if it might bite her. "Why are you doing this?" Marisol's eyes held hers, unwavering. "Because someone once watched me walk back into a burning house and called it loyalty. I survived anyway. But I promised myself I'd never let another woman mistake fire for home if I had the power to intervene." Naomi swallowed hard. "And what do you want in return?" Marisol smiled then, sharp, honest, not comforting at all. "Nothing that belongs to you. But I do want one thing. I want you to stop romanticizing endurance. I want you to stop calling suffering love." Naomi's pulse steadied into something harder. "So what is this? An offer?" Marisol lifted her coffee cup, eyes cool and certain. "It's an offer with teeth. I'll give you safety, resources, and time, but you will not waste them. You will not hide here for weeks and call it healing while he rewrites you into a cautionary tale." Naomi stared at the phone again, at Grant's messages lined up like a tightening noose. For the first time, she understood. This wasn't just about a marriage. It was about narrative, about power, about who got to define her. She picked up the attorney's card. Her hand didn't shake this time. "All right," Naomi said, voice hoarse but steady. "Tell me what to do first." Marisol's smile softened into something almost like pride. "First," she said, "you don't go back. You don't answer him. And you don't let anyone convince you that choosing yourself is cruelty." Outside, Chicago kept moving. Inside, Naomi Carter made her first decision as a woman no longer available for someone else's convenience. Naomi thought calling a lawyer would make her feel powerful. Instead, it made everything real. She sat at the small desk in Marisol's hotel suite, the attorney's card resting between her palms like a live wire. The room was quiet, too quiet, every sound amplified by the weight of what she was about to do. This wasn't a threat. It wasn't leverage. It was a line crossed so decisively there would be no walking it back. She dialed. "Reynolds Law," a woman's voice answered, calm and unhurried. "This is Aisha." Naomi swallowed. "My name is Naomi Carter. I was told to call you." There was a pause, brief, professional. "Marisol Vega's Naomi?" "Yes." "All right," Aisha said gently. "Start wherever you need to." That was when Naomi realized she didn't know where to begin. The betrayal felt too large, too tangled to compress into sentences that would make sense to someone who hadn't lived inside it. Her voice shook as she tried, An affair? A best friend? Manipulation? Threats disguised as concern? She heard herself explaining, justifying, minimizing, the way women are taught to do even when they're bleeding. Aisha interrupted her softly. Naomi, stop for a moment. Naomi froze. You don't need to convince me, Aisha continued. I believe you. And what you're describing isn't just infidelity, it's coercive control, narrative abuse. He's already laying groundwork to discredit you. The words landed with both relief and terror. So what do I do? Naomi asked. Aisha exhaled slowly. We move fast. We document everything. You do not respond to him. You do not go back alone. And you prepare yourself for something I need to be honest about. Naomi's chest tightened. Which is? He's going to escalate, Aisha said plainly. Men who build their identities on control don't let go quietly, especially when the woman they underestimated stops playing her part. Naomi closed her eyes. The truth of it settled deep in her bones. Grant had always needed to be admired, needed to be right, needed to be the one who decided how stories ended. I have evidence, Naomi said. Messages, timelines. Good, Aisha replied. That gives us teeth. But Naomi, listen to me carefully. This will not feel empowering at first. It will feel like grief. As if summoned by the word, the tears came. Not the explosive sobs from Michigan Avenue, but a slow, leaking collapse. Naomi covered her face with her hands, her shoulders folding inward as the enormity of what she was doing finally caught up to her. Marriage wasn't just love. It was infrastructure, shared history, shared assumptions. And now she was dismantling it piece by piece. I feel like I'm dying, she whispered. I know, Aisha said, voice steady and kind. But what's actually happening is worse and better than that. You're losing the version of yourself that survived by disappearing. Naomi's breath hitched. What if he's right? What if I can't? He's not, Aisha cut in firmly. And even if you were afraid, fear is not proof of weakness. It's proof you're stepping out of a cage. After the call ended, Naomi sat very still. The room felt heavier, as if the air itself had thickened. Her phone buzzed again. Grant, relentless. This is getting out of hand. People are asking questions. I'm worried about you. Please just come home so we can talk. She stared at the messages until the words blurred together. Her thumb hovered over the screen, muscle memory screaming for appeasement, for explanation, for soothing. Instead, she powered the phone off. That was when she fell apart. It happened quietly at first. She slid down the side of the bed until she was sitting on the floor, knees pulled to her chest, arms wrapped around herself like a shield. The tears came harder now, racking her body, grief finally catching up to strategy. She cried for the marriage she thought she had, for the future she had planned, for the woman who had swallowed her instincts because she believed love required patience more than honesty. Marisol appeared in the doorway without announcing herself, took one look at Naomi on the floor, and said nothing. She simply crossed the room and sat beside her, close enough to be present, far enough to let Naomi break without interruption. After a long while, Naomi's sobs softened into something quieter. Exhaustion replaced despair. She wiped her face with shaking hands. I'm scared, she admitted. Marisol nodded. Good. Fear means you understand the stakes. Naomi laughed weakly. That's not comfort. It's not meant to be, Marisol replied. Comfort is what kept you trapped. This, she gestured to the room, to the moment, to the choice. This is honesty. Naomi leaned her head back against the bed frame, staring at the ceiling. Her life, as she had known it, was officially over. The legal wheels were turning. The narrative war had begun. There would be fallout, mess, loss. But beneath the fear, beneath the grief, there was something else now, thin but unmistakable. Resolve. She had called the lawyer. She had chosen herself. And even as she fell apart on a hotel floor, Naomi Carter understood something she never had before. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let yourself break, so you don't spend the rest of your life pretending you're whole. Naomi slept for 2 hours and woke up like someone being dragged to trial. There was no gentle transition into morning, no soft ease, just the blunt reality of what came next. She had to go back, not for Grant, not for closure, for documents, for personal items, for the pieces of her life that were still hers on paper and in truth, before someone decided they weren't. Aisha had been clear: secure the essentials first. Anything sentimental could wait. Anything replaceable could be replaced. But identity, passport, birth certificate, financial records, that had to be protected like oxygen. By noon, a car waited in the hotel's private driveway, black and discreet. Naomi stood under the awning with her coat buttoned to her throat, her overnight bag in one hand, her phone in the other, turned off like a boundary made physical. Marisol joined her, sunglasses on, despite the gray sky. "You ready?" Naomi's mouth felt dry. "No." "Good," Marisol said. "We go anyway." The driver stepped out and opened the rear door without speaking. For the first time, Naomi really looked at him. He was tall, taller than most men she met in boardrooms, and built in a way that suggested strength without show. His hair was dark, cut neat, and his face held the calm neutrality of someone trained to be unnoticed. But his eyes were the part that snagged her attention. Pale gray, assessing without staring, as if he registered details automatically. "Ms. Carter," he said, voice low, even, no hint of curiosity, no hint of pity. "I'm Caleb, not Mrs. Carter, not Holloway, not attached to Grant's name like an accessory, just her." The small courtesy hit Naomi harder than she expected. She nodded once and slid into the back seat. Marisol got in beside her. The doors shut with finality, sealing them into warm leather and controlled quiet. As the car pulled away, Naomi stared out the window at the city blurring past. The river, the bridges, the museum district where her name still existed on email signatures and donor invitations. She wondered how long it would take before Grant started calling people in those circles, performing concern like a costume. She wondered who would believe him. "Breathe," Marisol murmured, so softly it didn't feel like an instruction. Naomi did. Caleb drove with the steadiness of someone who had done this under worse circumstances. He didn't speak. He didn't turn the radio on. The silence in the car wasn't awkward. It was protective, like a held line. When they reached Naomi's building, the doorman's face shifted the moment he saw her. Surprise, discomfort, and something that looked like sympathy trapped behind professionalism. "Ms. Carter," he said quickly, "we, haven't seen you." Naomi heard the unspoken truth. "We've seen Grant." "It's fine," she replied, voice controlled. "I'm just here for personal items." He nodded too quickly, eyes darting toward the elevators as if expecting someone to appear. The ride up was too long. Naomi stared at the numbers ticking upward, her heartbeat matching the steady climb. When the elevator doors opened, the hallway looked exactly as it always had. Clean, quiet, expensive. It was strange how betrayal didn't change wallpaper. Naomi's key still worked. The lock turned, and the door swung open onto her old life. The apartment smelled faintly of Grant's cologne and something else, champagne, perfume, as if the air itself had been used and left behind. Naomi stepped inside and felt a wave of nausea, not because the place was unfamiliar, but because it was too familiar. Everything was where she had left it, except now it all looked staged, like a museum exhibit of a marriage that had died without her consent. Caleb entered behind her carrying flattened boxes and a roll of tape. His movements were efficient, measured. He didn't look around with curiosity. He looked around like someone scanning for danger. Naomi headed straight for the bedroom. The sheets were different, rumpled in a new way. The pillowcases she'd bought last spring were missing. In their place were plain white ones from the linen closet, evidence of an attempt to erase. She opened the closet and reached for her passport case. It was still there, shoved behind a stack of Grant's sweaters. She took it, hand steady, and placed it into a box. Then her birth certificate folder. Then the envelope of legal documents Aisha had instructed her to secure. Each item made the situation more real. Each item felt like pulling bricks out of a wall she had once called home. Marisol hovered near the doorway, phone in hand, eyes sharp. 10 minutes, she said quietly. Get what matters. Naomi nodded, swallowing down the urge to stop and stare at wedding photos, to touch the life she was leaving, as if touch might translate to understanding. She moved faster. In the living room, Caleb taped a box with neat precision. He's been here, Naomi said, surprising herself by speaking. Caleb's gaze flicked to the discarded champagne cork on the counter. Yes. Naomi's jaw tightened. He knew I'd come back. Caleb didn't sugarcoat it. He expected you to. The simple sentence lit something in Naomi's chest. Anger, sharp and alive. Grant expected her to return like a boomerang, no matter how hard he threw her away. He expected her to follow the script. She carried another box toward the door. That was when the lock turned from the outside. Naomi froze. Marisol's head snapped up. Caleb moved without hesitation, stepping between Naomi and the hallway with a quiet speed that made her realize how carefully he had been watching the door. It opened. Grant stood there like a man pulled out of a storm, hair uncombed, jaw shadowed with stubble, eyes too bright. He looked exhausted, frantic, and furious all at once. The sight of Naomi triggered immediate relief in his face, as if she had returned to her rightful place. Naomi, he breathed. Thank God. Where have you been? His gaze flicked to Marisol, then to Caleb, suspicion sharpening. Who are these people? Naomi's throat tightened, but she forced her voice to remain steady. I'm here for my things. Grant stepped forward. Caleb shifted, blocking his path with a calm that was almost insulting. Grant's eyes narrowed. Move. Caleb didn't. You've been asked not to be here. Grant's voice rose. This is my home. Naomi felt something cold settle into place. It's not, she said quietly. Not for me anymore. Grant stared as if she had spoken a foreign language. You can't do this, he snapped. You can't just disappear and come back with... His gaze cut to Caleb. Security like I'm some kind of criminal. Marisol's voice sliced through. If you weren't acting like one, you wouldn't need to be managed. Grant ignored her. His attention snapped back to Naomi, eyes softening, voice lowering into the tone he used on donors and reporters. The tone designed to soothe and control. Baby, he said. This isn't you. You're overwhelmed. I get it. We can talk. We can fix this. Naomi almost laughed. Fix. As if betrayal were a broken vase and not a deliberate fire. I'm not here to talk, Naomi said. Grant's face tightened. The mask slipped. Just a fraction, but enough. Then what are you doing? Naomi lifted the box in her arms, tape biting into her fingers. Taking back what's mine. For a moment, Grant looked like he might lunge, might grab her, might force the scene into the kind of chaos he could later describe as evidence of her instability. Caleb's presence stopped him. Grant's eyes flicked to Caleb again, calculating. And who the hell are you exactly? Caleb's expression didn't change. Someone making sure she leaves the way she came in, on her own terms. Naomi stepped forward, past Caleb, past Grant, and into the hallway with her head high. Her heart was pounding, but her hands didn't shake. This was the first battle. Not the end, not even close. But as the elevator doors closed and Grant's face vanished behind them, confused, furious, losing his grip, Naomi understood something profound. He had expected her to come back alone. He had not expected her to come back ready. Naomi learned quickly that survival had a rhythm. It wasn't dramatic the way movies promised. There were no soaring breakthroughs, no clean lines between pain and healing. There were mornings when she woke up steady and almost hopeful, and afternoons when a song on the radio or a familiar street name hollowed her out all over again. Marisol gave her structure, not comfort. A temporary position overseeing an arts and medicine initiative tied to several Chicago hospitals. It was meaningful work, rooted in impact rather than prestige, and it demanded Naomi's full attention. Patience, budgets, partnerships, art that had to justify its existence not to donors, but to people in pain. "You don't need a pedestal right now," Marisol had said. "You need something real." Naomi agreed, even when exhaustion made her question everything. Caleb drove her every day. At first, they barely spoke. He opened doors, confirmed schedules, adjusted routes when traffic snarled the city. He remembered which mornings she preferred silence and which ones she asked for coffee without sugar. He noticed when her shoulders tightened and slowed the car just enough that she could breathe. It wasn't chivalry, it was attentiveness. That difference mattered more than she expected. One afternoon, after a long meeting with hospital administrators who smiled too much and promised too little, Naomi slid into the back seat and exhaled sharply. "They want the optics," she said without thinking, "not the work." Caleb glanced at her in the mirror. "That's usually the case." She laughed, surprised. "You're not going to tell me to be patient." "No," he replied evenly. "Patience is overrated when it's used to stall progress." Naomi studied him then, not his hands on the wheel or the clean line of his jaw, but the way he spoke. Direct, unpolished, not trying to impress. "You sound like someone who's been in those rooms," she said. Caleb hesitated, just a beat too long. "I've been adjacent." She let it go. For now. Days passed, weeks almost. Naomi learned the shape of her new life in fragments. The satisfaction of seeing a patient respond to a piece of art. The quiet pride of watching a young artist realize their work mattered. The discomfort of being seen without being attached to Grant's name. The relief of not having to perform gratitude for access. And always, the slow burn of rebuilding herself. One morning she overslept and spilled coffee down the front of her blouse. Frustration sharp and sudden. By the time she reached the car, she was blinking back angry tears. Caleb waited until she settled before speaking. "Bad morning?" She snorted. "That obvious? You're gripping your bag like it owes you money." That did it. Naomi laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. It surprised both of them. "Thank you," she said, catching her breath, "for not pretending I'm fine." Caleb nodded once. "You don't seem like someone who needs pretending." The words stayed with her. Still, healing was not linear. The smear campaign landed harder than Naomi expected. A blog post framed Grant as a worried husband, Naomi as overwhelmed, unstable. A donor withdrew quietly. A board member suggested she take time. She sat in the car afterward, staring out the window, numb. "I knew this would happen," she said softly, "and it still hurts." Caleb didn't offer platitudes. "You want to be angry, or you want to be strategic?" Naomi closed her eyes. "Both." "That tracks," he said. She looked at him then, really looked, at the faint scar near his knuckle, at the way his suit fit too well for someone who didn't care about appearances, at the tension that lived just under his calm. "You're not just a driver," she said quietly. Caleb's grip on the wheel tightened. "Neither are you just someone's wife." The air shifted between them, not romantic, not dangerous, but honest. Naomi didn't want a savior. She didn't want a man to rescue her from pain she was learning to carry herself. What unsettled her was the realization that Caleb wasn't offering rescue at all. He showed up. He paid attention. He treated her like a full human being on her worst days. Not a prince, not a fantasy, a person. And that, Naomi was beginning to understand, was far more dangerous to the old version of her than any fairy tale ever could be. Sloan didn't beg for the meeting. That alone told Naomi everything. The message arrived late in the evening, carefully composed, stripped of emojis and false warmth. "We need to talk. Not for him, for us." It named a cafe in River North, public enough to feel safe, discreet enough to control the audience. Naomi read it twice before responding. "Tomorrow, 1 hour." She arrived first. The cafe was dim, all dark wood and low jazz, the kind of place where conversations slipped easily into the background. Naomi chose a table near the window, back straight, coat still on. She did not order anything. She wanted nothing tying her to the place longer than necessary. Sloane arrived on time this time. She looked different. Not undone, never that, but sharpened. Her makeup was precise, her posture rigid, her eyes too alert. This was not the woman who had once sprawled on Naomi's sofa with bare feet and shared secrets. This was a strategist entering hostile territory. "Naomi," Sloane said, sitting without being invited. "You look, well." Naomi didn't return the compliment. "Say what you came to say." Sloane flinched, just slightly. Then she exhaled and leaned back, folding her hands together, as if bracing herself. "You know now," she said. Naomi met her gaze. "I've known for a while." "How long?" "Long enough to stop being surprised." Silence stretched between them, thick and uncomfortable. Around them, the cafe hummed with other people's lives. Laughter, clinking glasses, the illusion that choices were simple. Sloane broke first. "I didn't plan to fall in love with him," she said. Naomi's mouth twitched. Not a smile, not a grimace. "That's where you want to start?" "It matters," Sloane insisted, voice tightening. "You think this was just betrayal for fun. It wasn't. I was drowning, Naomi." Naomi tilted her head. "So you climbed onto my life to breathe?" Sloane's jaw clenched. "You don't understand what it's like to always be adjacent, to power, to opportunity, watching people like you get chosen." Naomi's chest tightened. "People like me?" Sloane hesitated, then pushed forward, reckless now. "You're brilliant, and everyone knows it. You walk into rooms and they want to believe in you. You make donors feel noble just by existing. And you didn't even want what you had." The words hit with startling force, not because they were cruel, but because they were honest in a way Sloane had never allowed herself to be before. "I wanted it," Sloane continued, voice rising. "The life, the access, the safety, and you treated it like a burden." Naomi stared at her, stunned. "I treated my marriage like a burden?" "You treated him like a project," Sloane shot back. "You were always fixing, improving, moralizing. Grant wanted to feel admired, not managed." Naomi laughed softly. "So you admired him by helping him lie to his wife?" Sloane's eyes flashed. "I saw him. I gave him space to be who he was without expectations." "Without accountability," Naomi corrected. Sloane leaned forward now, voice low and intense. "He promised me things, a future. He said he felt trapped, that you made him feel small." Naomi's hands curled into fists beneath the table. "And you believed him?" "Yes," Sloane said, fierce and unapologetic. "Because he believed me. He chose me." The words landed like a confession and a justification all at once. Naomi leaned back, her voice calm despite the storm in her chest. "No, Sloane, he didn't choose you. He used you the same way he used me, just in a different role." Sloane shook her head. "That's not true." "It is," Naomi said quietly. "The difference is that I didn't mistake manipulation for intimacy." For the first time, Sloane's composure cracked. Her eyes shimmered with something like panic. "You think you're better than me." Naomi considered her carefully. "I think I stopped lying to myself." Sloane swallowed. "I didn't mean for it to get this far." Naomi's voice hardened. "You knew where the bodies were buried because I trusted you. You used my pain as leverage. That's not love. That's opportunism." Sloane's shoulders slumped, anger bleeding into something uglier, fear. "If you go public," she said quietly, "you'll destroy him, and me." Naomi met her gaze without flinching. "You destroyed yourselves." Silence fell again, heavier this time. Finally, Sloane straightened, something defensive snapping back into place. "We could still manage this," she said. "Control the narrative. You walk away quietly. He keeps his reputation. I keep my future. Everyone wins." Naomi stood. The movement was so sudden, it startled Sloane into looking up. "No," Naomi said, voice steady and final. "Everyone doesn't win when silence is the price. I'm done trading my dignity for peace." Sloane's lips parted. "You're making a mistake." Naomi picked up her coat. "The only mistake would be believing you were ever my friend." She walked out without looking back. Outside, the night air was sharp and clean. Naomi inhaled deeply, her pulse steady, her spine straight. The truth Sloane had offered was ugly, yes, but it was also liberating. Envy, entitlement, survival masquerading as love. Naomi finally understood. Sloane hadn't stolen her husband. Sloane had revealed exactly who she had always been. Naomi began to notice the cracks because she was no longer trying not to. When you spend years shrinking yourself to survive, you learn to overlook inconsistencies, people's pauses, their contradictions, the way truths flicker briefly before disappearing. But once you stop performing, you start seeing. And Caleb Ward was full of small, quiet details that didn't belong to the role he claimed. It started with language. They were driving back from a hospital board meeting when his phone rang through the car's sound system. He answered without thinking, his voice low and fluent, French, then Italian, then a brief exchange that sounded unmistakably like Russian. When he hung up, he glanced at the mirror and caught Naomi watching him. "You speak a lot of languages," she said carefully. Caleb's jaw tightened. "I read." She let it go. For the moment. Then there was the watch. Subtle, understated, easily missed unless you knew what you were looking at. Naomi had spent enough time around collectors and donors to recognize craftsmanship when she saw it. The kind of watch you didn't buy to impress anyone, because anyone who knew what it was didn't need convincing. "You like vintage?" she asked one evening, nodding toward his wrist as he opened her door. Caleb hesitated. It was a gift from someone generous, his mouth curved, not quite a smile. From someone guilty. That answer stayed with her longer than it should have. The final crack came during a gallery visit in the West Loop. The curator, a sharp-eyed man with an ego too large for the room, had dismissed Naomi's proposal with a polite smile and thinly veiled condescension. "We're looking for something more established," he'd said, "less experimental." Naomi had thanked him and walked away, jaw tight, disappointment burning quietly. In the car afterwards, she stared out the window, silent. Caleb didn't drive right away. "That man doesn't understand his own collection," he said flatly. Naomi turned to him, startled. "Excuse me?" "He's curating for donors, not for legacy," Caleb continued. "Half his acquisitions won't matter in 10 years. Naomi blinked. "How would you know that?" Caleb's hands tightened on the wheel. He looked at her in the mirror, something wary flickering behind his calm. "Because I've sat in rooms where people like him justify mediocrity with money," he said. "And because I've seen what lasts." The silence that followed was charged, heavy with things unsaid. "You're not just a driver," Naomi said quietly. Caleb exhaled slowly, as if releasing something he'd been holding too long. "Neither are you just someone recovering from a bad marriage." She studied him then, not the uniform, not the controlled posture, but the tension beneath it, the restraint, the choice to be smaller than he clearly was. "Who are you really?" she asked. Caleb pulled the car to the curb, engine idling. He didn't look at her right away. "Someone who learned the hard way that being seen for what you have is very different from being seen for who you are," he said. Naomi's chest tightened. "That's not an answer. It's the only honest one I can give right now." Later that evening, Marisol filled in the rest, without drama. They were in her living room, wine untouched between them, the city lights casting long shadows across the floor. Marisol watched Naomi pace once before speaking. "You've figured it out," she said. "Enough," Naomi replied. "He's not just working for you." "No," Marisol agreed. "He's taking refuge with me." Naomi stopped. "From what?" Marisol's gaze softened, but her voice stayed firm. "From a life that taught him to mistrust intimacy. Caleb Ward is the interim CEO of the Ward Hale Group. Hotels, real estate, international holdings. His father died 3 years ago. His ex-wife left shortly after, took half the company and most of his faith in people." Naomi felt the room tilt. "Then why pretend?" "Because when people know your net worth, they stop listening to your humanity," Marisol said. Caleb wanted to know who would treat him decently when he had nothing obvious to offer. Naomi's stomach twisted. So I was a test. Marisol shook her head. No, you were an accident. The word hit harder than expected. He didn't plan to care, Marisol continued. He didn't plan to like you. He certainly didn't plan to admire you. That part terrified him. Naomi sank onto the sofa, anger and something far more dangerous tangling in her chest. He should have told me. Yes, Marisol said simply, and he will. Tonight, as if summoned, a knock sounded at the door. Naomi's pulse spiked. She stood, every instinct on edge, and opened it to find Caleb there. No suit, no uniform, just dark jeans, a sweater, and an expression stripped of careful neutrality. I owe you the truth, he said, and I don't want to hide anymore. Naomi crossed her arms, heart hammering. You should have trusted me. Caleb nodded, shame naked on his face. I know, and if you walk away, I'll understand. But before you do, please know this. I never once saw you as an experiment. You were the first person in a long time who treated me like I existed outside of what I could provide. Naomi searched his face for manipulation and found only fear, the honest kind, the kind that came with risk. I don't need a prince, she said slowly. I know, Caleb replied. That's why I stayed. Silence stretched between them, fragile and alive. The mask had slipped. What stood beneath it wasn't perfection. It was a man, flawed and wary, standing in front of a woman who had finally learned the difference between being chosen and choosing for herself. The first article didn't name Naomi outright. It didn't have to. It described a museum executive who had recently suffered emotional instability and a concerned husband who was seeking help for his wife during a difficult time. It quoted an unnamed source close to the couple. It praised the husband's patience. It framed the wife's silence as evidence of shame. Naomi read it once, twice, then set her phone down as if it were something sharp. Her stomach turned, not because the words were new, but because she recognized the strategy. Grant and Sloan weren't just attacking her privately anymore. They were turning her into a cautionary tale. By noon, the story had evolved. A second post appeared from a bigger outlet. This one used Grant's name and title, brand strategist, civic philanthropist, wrapped in benevolent language like armor. The comments were worse. Hope she gets the help she needs. Some women can't handle success. He always seemed like such a good guy. Poor Grant. Naomi's hands shook with a rage so cold it felt like clarity. She was sitting in Marisol's office when the museum board called. A wellness check. A request that she take a step back for her own good. A suggestion that her project might be too demanding right now. Translation: we don't want controversy. Naomi ended the call politely, then stared at the wall for a long time, trying to breathe around the pressure building in her chest. The worst part wasn't the attack itself. It was the familiarity of it. The world had always been more comfortable with Naomi as a symbol than as a person. If she was brilliant but quiet, inspiring but agreeable, the narrative worked. If she was angry, specific, unwilling to be softened, then she became a problem to manage. Caleb stood in the doorway, watching her with those unsettling gray eyes. You're thinking about responding, he said. Naomi didn't look at him. I'm thinking about burning them to the ground. That's an option, Caleb replied, too calm. And with what I have, it would be easy. She finally turned. With what you have. The words carried more weight than she intended. Caleb's jaw tightened. I mean resources, he said carefully. Influence. Lawyers. I know what you mean. Naomi's voice was steady, but something in her chest ached. And I'm telling you, no. Caleb took a step forward. Naomi, they're destroying you publicly. Let me... Save me? Naomi's laugh was sharp, humorless. No, I didn't claw my way out of one man's control to hand my life to another, even a kinder one. His expression flickered, hurt, then understanding. I'm not trying to own your story. Then don't write it, she said softly. Stand beside me while I do. Silence stretched between them, tense and fragile. Marisol entered without knocking, phone in hand, eyes sharp. They're escalating, she said. Sloan just fed a reporter a quote about your fragility. Naomi's breath caught. Of course she did. And Grant's team is floating the idea that you're being influenced by outside parties, Marisol continued, gaze cutting briefly to Caleb. They want to make you look unstable and manipulated. Naomi's pulse spiked. They're trying to trap me. Yes, Marisol said. So you don't react emotionally, you respond surgically. Naomi sank into the chair, palms flat on the desk, grounding herself. The urge to scream clawed at her throat. The desire to call Grant, to demand he stop, flared like an old instinct. Then she remembered his voice in the bedroom. We'll control it. She lifted her head. Okay, she said quietly. Let's talk strategy. Aisha joined by speakerphone within minutes, voice crisp and unflinching. We do not address rumors, she said. We address facts. We prepare a statement that's short, firm, and legally safe. And Naomi, no improvising. Naomi almost smiled. Noted, Aisha continued. We also send cease and desist letters to the outlets repeating defamatory claims. And we document every lie. Not for revenge, for court. Naomi's phone buzzed again. An unknown number. She didn't need to guess. You're embarrassing yourself, the message read. Stop before you ruin your own life. Naomi stared at it for a long moment, feeling the old reflex to shrink, then felt something new rise in its place. Rage, yes, but also power. She handed the phone to Marisol. Add it to the file. Marisol's lips curved. Good girl. Naomi's eyes narrowed. Don't. Marisol laughed softly. Fair. Good woman, then. That night, Naomi stood in front of a mirror and rehearsed the statement Aisha drafted. Not because she needed to convince the world, but because she needed to hear her own voice say the truth without apology. Her hands trembled at first, then steadied. By morning, the statement went out through official channels, measured, precise, unshakable. It did not plead. It did not explain. It did not beg to be believed. It simply established boundaries and consequences. Grant's camp responded within hours with another article, louder, more emotional, claims of heartbreak, concern, sadness. It was a performance designed to invite the public into their marriage like spectators. Naomi read it and felt nothing. Not because she wasn't hurt, because she was done. The fire was public now, and it would scorch anyone standing too close. Naomi understood the stakes with brutal clarity. Her career, her reputation, her future could all be swallowed by a story written by people who didn't see her humanity. But Naomi was no longer the woman who feared being seen as difficult. If the world wanted a spectacle, she would not give them one. She would give them something far more dangerous. The truth, delivered with calm hands and sharpened teeth. The night Naomi Carter opened the doors, the city finally saw her without anyone else's shadow. The gallery space sat just off the river in a renovated brick building. Warm light spilling onto the sidewalk, music low and intimate, the air scented with paint and fresh flowers. It wasn't the kind of place that screamed luxury. It was the kind of place that whispered intention. Every piece on the walls had been chosen with care, not for prestige but for meaning. Work by artists who had been overlooked, underestimated, dismissed because they didn't fit the tidy story the world preferred. Naomi stood near the entrance, wearing a dress she had chosen for herself. Deep green silk, simple and bold, the kind of elegance that didn't ask permission. Her hair framed her face in clean lines. Her posture held the quiet authority of a woman who had fought for her own voice and won. Across the room, Marisol smiled like a proud general watching a soldier return from war. Aisha hovered nearby, scanning the crowd with the satisfaction of someone who knew exactly how much paperwork it took to make freedom real. And beside Naomi, steady, present, not leading her but matching her, stood Caleb. No uniform, no mask, Just a man who had learned that love wasn't possession, and that strength wasn't something to be offered like charity. He leaned close and murmured, "They're here for you." Naomi's throat tightened. "I'm here for me." The evening unfolded like proof. Critics lingered longer than expected. Donors asked questions that weren't polite, but curious. Artists glowed under attention that didn't cheapen them. Naomi moved through the room with calm confidence, answering, directing, welcoming, fully herself. Then a woman approached her, hands trembling around a catalog. "I'm sorry," the woman said, voice shaky. "I know you're busy, I read about you, the divorce, the rumors, and then what you built afterward." Her eyes shone with tears. "I'm leaving my husband, and I keep thinking I'm crazy for walking away from financial security." Naomi didn't hesitate. She took the woman's hand, grounding her gently. "You're not crazy," she said. "You're brave." The woman swallowed hard. "What if I regret it?" Naomi held her gaze with a kind of certainty she once begged to borrow from someone else. "The only mistake," she said softly, "is staying somewhere you've disappeared." The woman's shoulders sagged with relief, like a door opening inside her. She nodded, wiped her face, and walked away lighter than she arrived. Naomi watched her go and felt something settle in her chest. Peace, not because life had become perfect, but because it finally belonged to her. Later, as the crowd thinned, Naomi's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Saw your name in the press. Guess you didn't need me after all. Sloan and I are engaged. Hope you're happy." Naomi read it once. She felt no anger, no ache, no urge to defend herself. The words landed like dust on glass, visible, insignificant, easily wiped away. She turned the screen toward Caleb. "Do you think he'll ever understand what he lost?" Caleb's expression softened. "No." Naomi nodded, then deleted the message. "Good," she whispered, "because I finally understand what I found." Caleb reached for her hand. "And what's that?" Naomi looked around the gallery, the art, the people, the life she had built with intention. And then she looked back at him. "Myself," she said. "Everything else is a choice." He kissed her forehead, not possessive, not performative, just present. "Best choice I ever got invited into," he murmured. Near the entrance, a sign gleamed under the warm lights. It wasn't Grant's name. It wasn't a brand. It wasn't a couple's identity. It was hers. Carter House. Naomi stood beneath it for a long moment, breathing in the quiet victory of a beginning that had her name on it. And if you felt that, if you've ever had to rebuild yourself from ashes, if you've ever needed proof that betrayal can become a doorway, tap like, drop a comment with the moment that hit you hardest, and follow the channel for the next chapter, because Naomi's story doesn't end here. This was never just about what she survived. It was always about what she chose.